Now, you've been quite outspoken about this IHRA definition, haven't you? And just explain, I think it was at the back end of last year things started to really progress in with your sort of story. Can you just explain what happened?
I mean, I don't know how far. I mean, I've only recently become a campaigner for Palestine in August. I mean, okay, I've donated money to MAP for 20 years or something. And even since, well, I was there in the Sudan, I was in Africa in 1979, which was when I began to see what was happening. I mean, I was in Sudan and stuff, and I began to understand big influence of Yasser Arafat speaking to people there. And I began to understand how angry the Arabs were. And I began to understand that what was happening in Israel wasn't the Israel that I was brought up with, which was the land of freedom and kibbutzes, but it was actually a different place. It was a racist place. But I didn't really start campaigning until last year. And it was because in August, I'd been writing to the members of the National Executive, the CLP members who were being elected. These are people like me. And, ordinary people, not trade unions. So there's 39 members of the National Executive Committee, and 9 of them come from the CLPs. And we all get to vote. And I thought, well, I'll ask them what they think, because the IHRA thing, it just exploded. It was all in the papers. Suddenly, anti-Semitism was the thing. And I knew that the IHRA thing was coming. So I said to each one of them, if I say Israel is a racist endeavor, would you want me expelled? And I wrote to 30 of them. And I got some amazing stuff back. Some astonishing stuff. There was one guy, I think it was Luke Aikenhurst or something, said, oh yeah, if we don't have the IHRA, we're going to have to leave Britain. All the Jews are going to be driven out of this country. And I thought, this is insane. Why are these people saying these things? I mean, where do they get this garbage from? And I realized that the Jewish labor movement were hawking this nonsense, and they were hawking it to candidates. I had a black woman, a black councillor in London, who said, oh, of course I'm for the IHRA. I think anti-Semitism is a terrible thing. And I wrote back and I said, well, you do understand that if you adopt it, it means I can't point out that there's apartheid in Israel. And she never wrote back. Well, she never got elected, but the point is that, and these people had actually written, JLM had been giving out certificates that they were all proudly displaying on their websites, saying, I'm supporting JLM, I want the IHRA. And it's the JLM, the Jewish Labour Movement, that are affiliated to the Labour Party that have fought for this, along with John Lansman and Rio Wolfson and a few key players. They have brought this thing into the Labour Party, and they've brought it in to muzzle Corbyn and to kill criticism of Israel. And they've succeeded.
Yeah, it certainly seems like they've succeeded in pretty much quelling. I mean, I call it an attack on progressives. It's not just happening over here, of course. It's happening in America as well. Now, what was it that sort of led to you? Because you have recently been suspended from the Labour Party, or rather rejected, if you want to.
I'm still a member. I mean, I've been a member since 1986. They're not going to get rid of me that easy. Okay, I left for a couple of years over Iraq, but I have been an active member, leafleting, campaigning, fundraising, doing benefits, doing motions. I was political education officer for like 15 years, trade union officer. I have put a lot of time in the Labour Party. They're not going to get rid of me. I mean, I've invested a lot in this agency. What I have to say, though, is I lodged, because of this response, okay, I'll just go back to what happened. What began all this trouble was on the 4th of September, I knew we were going to get this IHRA. I'd been looking at all the signals. John O'Donnell was the weekend before saying, oh yeah, we're going to have it. And I was ready. So in the middle of the night, I woke up, oh, I've got to do something. I know we need mass civil disobedience, I feel like. So I set up this petition on choice.org saying, if I declare Israel as a racist endeavor, it was more or less saying I declare Israel as a racist endeavor, and I challenge the NEC to expel me if you think I'm an anti-Semite. If you don't expel me, scrap this thing and let's go back to the way we were before, with the traditional understanding of what anti-Semitism was, which is discrimination or prejudice against Jews. And I lodged this on the 4th of September, the minute I heard they'd adopted this thing.
And yet that's a petition that you lodged as well?
Well, it's got a petition. It's petitioning the NEC to say, we think Israel's a racist endeavor. We're not anti-Jewish. We think you ought to abandon this. So it's a bit like, standing up to them and saying, you've adopted something which has taken away our freedom of speech on Israel. We are nonetheless going to say the thing which you are now declaring could be illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to say this thing, and we're going to stand together. And what are you going to do about it? Are you going to expel 1,600 people? If 1,600 people have signed it now, or are you going to get rid of this ridiculous notion and go back to some sensible definition of anti-Semitism, one that we've had for hundreds of years that we can all understand and has nothing to do with Israel?
And how did they respond?
Well, they've ignored me, of course. Why not? Well, they would ignore me, wouldn't they? But they know I'm there because I write to the NEC regularly. I write to all 39 of them.
And there's 1,600 that have signed this petition as well to join you to say that I think that Israel is a racist endeavour, either eject me or change this ridiculous. And obviously with the Labour Party being a bottom-up movement, so they say, surely that they should be looking at these things, especially if there's so many people behind it.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, bottom up would be great. Not enough people know about the petition. So in case anyone at home has got a pencil and paper, they can find it by going to tinyurl.com. That's tinyurl.com/Israel IHRA. And it's all in lowercase. But it doesn't matter. So if you type that into your computer, you will end up at the petition.
Okay, I'll put a link on the screen, and I'll leave a link below as well. Now, just recently, you have been suspended. Now, explain your suspension or your.
Okay. Well, I think I need to go a bit further. You see, talk about poking the snake. Well,
okay.
I think other things about Israel, and I think if you look at the IHRA definition, it's riddled with examples which suggests criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. Now, I've just picked one. So saying Israel is a racist endeavor is, they think, anti-Semitic. Another thing that they have in the IHRA definition is if you say Israel exaggerates the Holocaust. Now, this is a really, really contentious thing. So I said it. I said it in an email to the General Secretary of GMB Scotland, because he was going backwards and forwards with me saying, you're a vile anti-Semite. And I'm saying, listen, you ain't heard nothing yet. Not only do I think Israel is a racist endeavor, but I think it exaggerates the Holocaust for political ends. Boom. But now I have to say that I'm only parroting what an Israeli Minister of Education, ex-Minister of Education, Shiranja Alonji, I think her name is, who said exactly the same thing. He said, every time anyone criticizes Israel, we just bring up the Holocaust. That's our ticket. It's a trick. We use it shamelessly as an excuse for what we do. So 70, 80 years on after the Holocaust, you have the Israelis trying to make out that the Palestinians represent the same kind of threat as the Nazis in Germany. I mean, come off it. But this is what they do. They pretend that the Palestinians are the same kind of threat to Jews. So they do everything in the name of the Holocaust. They invade Lebanon in the name of, because it's defense, isn't it? We'll have to bomb Iran. It's defense. We'll have to invade Lebanon. It's defense. We'll have to starve the people of Gaza into hell. It's defense.
We bombed Syria. It's defense against Hezbollah.
That's right. Everything is defense because they call themselves the Israeli Defense Force, and they are defined by the Holocaust. They're defined by their need to defend themselves. And they say to the West again and again, if you don't stand with us, there will be another Holocaust. Is that what you want? So they use this to force the West to acquiesce to the extreme things they do. And we let them.
And all the time, obviously, there's extremes things they do. They're conflating them with sort of saying this is the will of the Jewish people, which it isn't, and then saying any criticism of it is anti-Semitic, which is all upside down and inside out and the back to front. But
they only do it. Okay, Jews have been the most persecuted race in human history. Look back, and they use that. I mean, I say this expression that gets people really angry. I say Jews have leverage, but only Zionists use that leverage.
Yeah, that's true.
And Jews have leverage because there's a guilt thing, like the Scots have leverage. I mean, you English give us £1 billion a year because you feel guilty about the Highland clearances and the fact that you need our oil. But it's £1 billion and we're grateful, but it's leverage. So we have leverage over the English and you give us money to keep us quiet. But the same thing goes is the Jews have leverage because of the Holocaust. But most of them just want to get on and live their lives. They don't want to use that. They don't want to play the guilt game. But the Zionists exploit it shamelessly. And I have to say Jews have the leverage because Hitler gassed anyone he could find. He wasn't caring whether you were a Zionist or what. If you were Jewish, you got killed. And the Brits did so badly during the Second World War in terms of protecting Jews. I mean, Churchill knew where all the gas chambers were. He knew where the death camps were. He knew Jews were being gassed. He never said anything. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons that we can say that we failed the Jews in the Second World War. We wouldn't let them in. The refugee trains were turned away. We failed them. And I think there's a kind of ongoing sense of guilt in Britain that we have not looked after the Jews. And that's why I try to understand, why is it that people have so happily acquiesced to this madness, this IHRA thing? And I look at, you know, most of the organizations in the country have jumped when Jews say, oh, some Jews say, oh, look, we need it. Of course we need it. Of course you need it. Of course you need a massive definition. We won't do the same for Islamic people because Muslims, hell, you know, they only arrived here yesterday. But, you know, Jews have been here a long time and you need our protection. So that is how this thing has been sold to the British people.
Which is, you brought up the Islamic is the Islamophobic thing there. I mean, you know, I noticed that how when we criticise Saudi Arabia, nobody says we're a bunch of Islamophobes.
No, we don't. That's true. But then again, they are not a colonial project. I mean, Israel is a colonial project. Through the Balfour Declaration, we created Israel. I mean, England and Scotland, well, Britain, they took this land that they gained from the Turkish Empire when the Ottoman Empire went bust, and they basically handed it in a deal to Zionists. So the whole thing is a colonial project. I mean, if you look at the origins of the people in Israel, they're not from that area. They're mostly from Russia originally.
Thanks for watching. Please make sure you're still subscribed and click the bell below for a notification of when I drop further videos. Also, click through to my website to find out ways which you can support me. I can't do this without your support, and I really appreciate it. Till next time, peace and take care.